Hi everyone, and welcome to Babbling's Irons. It's a fan show today. We've got James from E20. How you doing, mate?
All good, man. All good.
Good to hear. Sloth, how about yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. Thank you very much.
Awesome, guys. So, another week in West Ham. This time, probably less controversial than we've seen in previous weeks. We've seen an upturn, I guess you could say, in results. We haven't lost. So, I guess that is an upturn. But James, I know you wanted to talk about the system that's we're currently employing at the moment. So come on, you start the convo.
For me, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. It's 3-4-3 or 5-3-2 or whatever way you want to sort of sum it up. I think the last two games we've done all right defensively. Don't get me wrong. I can accept the points on them, but moving forward, I just don't see how it brings the best out of our attackers, in my opinion. Really done.
Yeah. Sloth, what about you? How do you feel?
I think that's a fair summary. I do think it kind of it's something that papers over the cracks in terms of our attacking output at the moment. We do have so little bite this season, and I think that is something that we're somewhat balancing out. We're not conceding that much, and it does mean it's not the most exciting football. But I think at the moment, if you're not conceding goals, then it's in a relegation fight, it kind of counters it. But long term, it's not something that I think we should take going forward.
Yeah, it's one of those formations that obviously can always be looked at as being negative because obviously it's three at the back. You have essentially 5 defenders, and you put less in going forward. But obviously, used in the right way, it can actually be incredibly offensive because you can obviously have players really high and so on. When you look at the likes of say Brighton and so on, who use it really effectively or have in the past. Obviously, the way we use it isn't that way. But do you guys think that it really nullifies how we get through midfield and how we attack? Because I constantly think that whilst you guys both say we look good defensively from an offensive point of view, it's quite dull, it's quite blunt, and it doesn't really seem to offer a great deal. Even though we've seen Antonio improve recently in this formation, doesn't seem to have improved that much, I think, from an overall kind of standpoint.
For me, I just want to say this, Steve. Yeah, for me, when you're attacking, I want to see West Ham attacking. Right, I think West Ham are a good side attacking, and when we're defensive, do you really see us scoring 2 goals in this setup? I just don't. Honestly, I really don't. I'll go back to the last 2 games: Newcastle away, Chelsea at home. Right, Newcastle away, we come out of the trap slow. And we could have been 2-0 down within the first 5 minutes. Like one of them was ruled out for VAR, the other one was a goal. Against Chelsea on Saturday, we could have been 3-0 down. Easily been 3-0 down. And for a team that's got 5 defenders at the back, they seem like they're all over the place. They're all running into each other. If we go back a few years ago, I'll never forget a game, Newcastle away, we lost 3-2 during COVID. When we had Dawson, Diop, and the Bonner at the back there, and they was all over the place. Dawson actually got sent off that game. I just don't think it suits West Ham. If I'm being truthfully honest, I'd rather see West Ham be on the front foot attacking teams, because we're always going to concede because we're West Ham United. We're not that defensively sharp. So I'd rather us be proactive than worrying about what the other team's doing. They should be worrying about what we're doing.
Do you think it's a formation that Moyes has gone to because he's worried about the deficiencies of his team or individuals within, say, like a fit of 4, that he's gone to this because it gives him gives him a sense of security, and he thinks that it covers for the deficiencies in the team, and he's maybe less concerned about the attacking side because in his view, a goal can come from anything. It could come from a set piece, a moment of brilliance from a player that he's just happening to entrust maybe a moment in games as opposed to an overall game plan in which to attack teams. And he's just hoping for a moment and to keep it tight. Do you think that's really where his mindset is at the moment? It's all about keep it tight, and we'll just try and create moments in the opposition end, and we'll try and capitalise there?
For me, he's trying to save his job. It's as simple as that. That's where, like, if you want to be real, he's trying to grind out games and try and just get West Ham out of this trouble that he's made. Do you know what I'm saying? The problem I have with this, before I hand it over to Steve, is that he's trying to play a system that he's never played in his management career. Not once. And he's trying to do it with West Ham in a season where we've just signed a load of players who don't. We're not seeing the best of Scamacca and Paqueta, in my opinion. I think we're seeing moments. Like, it's like a flashlight which comes on and off from time to time. Do you know what I'm saying? That's all we're seeing. And for me, he's just doing like a Sam Allardyce job, so to speak. Like, he's just getting the job done, basically. It's not the right way. If it keeps us in the league, then great. But if it don't, then it's just wrong on so many levels.
Yeah, yes. Sloth, how about you?
Yeah, I think I might get a bit slated for this, but I think it's kind of covering the fact that apart from Aguerd, I don't think we have an outstanding centre back. And there's nothing against Ogbonna, but I think Ogbonna, he's got a serious lack of pace. It's not his fault, he's aging, and he reads the game really well, but this is a pace-based league. There is so much reliance on that of the game. And when you have someone like Kera next to you, who, let's face it, is very error-prone at the moment, and he hasn't really shown his ability in a West Ham shirt. He shows it in the German side, but he's not shown it in the West Ham shirt. It's that kind of idea I think Moyes has, where he's gone, right, I've got Aguerd, I think I can rely on him, and I don't think I can rely on one defender next to him to make sure we don't concede. So I agree. I really agree with James where he said that he's put this formation in place because he's worried about his job. Now, is that sustainable? I don't think it is. It's one of those things where, as said, if we go down, it has to be viewed as a disaster, and it has to be viewed for the reality of what it is, where this is basic mismanagement. And Ogbonna, I want him to stay at the club. I'd love him to come along as a coach in the future, because he has so many great assets within his game. But it's almost like I've said it again, we've not planned for the long term at a higher level in terms of our board, in terms of our management, where we've not got the players in that we really should have. And I think we had a fantastic transfer window. Injuries aside, we signed very well. But the past 3-4 transfer windows where we decided against signing certain players, where we didn't make smart moves, it's really come back to bite us. So I think we could be playing a 4-4-2 at this point. We could be playing a 4-3-3. But it's just the fact that we haven't signed well that is stopping us. And yeah, I don't think 5 at the back is what we should be looking for long term. But I think at the moment, with the manager's decision to constantly put Souček in, with the injuries that we have, I think it's probably the one that is the safe bet.
Yeah. Thanks, Mick, as well for your copies. Your message, mate. Have a good one. But he did raise an interesting point here. Besides your feelings around the actual formation itself, do you guys actually believe we have the players that can actually support that solution and that formation and flourish in that kind of 3-4-3 formation we're kind of playing?
Not for me, mate. Sadly not. I look at Ogbonna, and what's the Mike was saying in the chat there. I make him right to a point.
Yeah.
Ogbonna shouldn't be our first choice. Like centre half. Like, listen, for how much we all love Ogbonna. He's been here a long time. He's been here from Upton Park days to the present day. But he should be coming off the bench or used as a reserve, basically. Like, we should have a starting 3 who are really, really good, and he should be the backup. I understand what Steve said about the transfer window, but letting Craig Dawson go and not bringing no one in, it just baffles me. It really does. Like, I know you can put Kerr in there, like Cresswell in there, Ben Johnson in there, but you're putting square pegs in round holes. And if we play a team, arguably, who's good in the air, we've got one centre half who's built like a centre half. Like, we've got a lot of right backs and left backs in a position where if balls are coming into the box, we're relying on one man to clear them out. So I just think Moyes is learning this system on the job, and he hasn't really took into account how to adapt to it, basically, in my opinion.
Yeah, something that for me is stuff we talked about before, that he's probably a good manager but not a good coach. That's my always concern with him. I don't think he's a great coach. I think he's a good manager. He's proven that. I just don't think he's a great coach. My own personal view on that formation, and I've said it since the start of the season, so I'm not going to change my mind. We don't have the players to support a back three. I know he made it work actually when we was in the lockdown season. It worked quite well, but the team that we had then is not the team we have now. That team were younger, for one. They also had a bit more pace. Masuaku was actually in form. He's only just started playing Emerson. Soufal's granted coming into form, but his quality of delivery has dropped. So when you start to add in those factors, it just starts to drop, out really. And, a fair point is we consistently play this low block, trying to grind out games in this formation, but tend to go 1-0 down, and then we have to come out. And, you could argue we were lucky against Chelsea to have 2 goals of theirs ruled out by VAR the week before. Obviously, we had Newcastle with a goal ruled out by VAR. We've had a good rub of the green with it, apart from obviously the disallowed goal that we had. But all in all, when you actually work it out, that's a fair rub of the green we've had and a bit of luck. And there are some warning signs, but soft. Move over for your take as well on it.
I mean, I've said it quite a lot that we just seem to start games slowly, and even since the start of the season, I've been saying it. It's worrying how it takes us a goal to wake up and to think, oh, we should get attacking and we should step up to the mark. Even at this 5 at the back, it does seem like we're not clicking. There's no gas. There's no gas under the fire. There's nothing to get us going. And worryingly, I think this comes down to the lack of pace in the squad. There's no impetus, and we can say like that Antonio's really stepped up in the last 2 games, but I'm afraid if you're a forward, you have to be scoring goals. If we want think you are being performing well, you have to be scoring goals, and he's just not.
Yeah, or even if you're not scoring goals, you're at least creating the chances or making the runs that is causing defense to be out of shape to exploit. But we're not necessarily seeing that. And if we look at what's happened today, apparently today in training we had 8 first-team players unavailable to train today. This is obviously going into the Tottenham game. They could all just be knocks. It could be precautionary, but again, we know 2 of those are going to be a little bit more long-term than just out maybe this weekend in Paqueta and Aguerd. Cornet has picked up a virus by all accounts. So again, he's out again for at least another week. So you just kind of we kind of made the comment on the review of the Chelsea game. People they just seem to be dropping like flies, and it's kind of, you maybe get to a point of, are they actually injured or they just don't want to play for the manager? Now that's a real stretch to say the last piece, but after a while, you start to maybe go, no, we've said this before, James, that there's some real parallels with the Avram Grant year.
I agree.
And there were cases where players were,
tools,
dipping in and out of the squad because they just wasn't feeling the manager. And I really want to pick up on one point I saw earlier when we were talking about the transfers, in that there was a player we were going for in the summer that obviously went to Everton because he spoke to Frank Lampard. Obviously, Frank Lampard made him feel like he was going to be a main player. By all accounts, apparently, Moyes said, you can have Onana, we'll pay the money, but really we only want to pay that money if you think he's ready for the first team. And the response was, he's not. I think as Onana has shown, he clearly is ready. He's incredibly raw, but if you can't think that he is more ready to play Premier League games than Souček has been this season, I really do question your ability in which to view a talent, to assess that talent in relation to your own squad, and also your ability in which how soon can I get him in. And I think with Anana, I know me and Sloth were really big fans of him last year and we're talking about him a lot, but even still, you have a young 20-year-old talent who is clearly going to come in wanting to fight for his place. How can you not think that player is going to be first team ready when he had played for Lille last season? Pretty sure he played in the Champions League for him as well. And you're still thinking that player's not ready. It's a bit of a baffling mindset, in my opinion, looking at, and I think it also just epitomizes his view on youth.
I think it's a real statement on the decision making at every single level at the club. And if you're saying to the manager, we'll get you him if you think he's ready, and then he's going, well, I don't think he's ready for the first team, why are you even thinking about paying £40 million for this player? Like, I was watching the Merseyside derby the other night, and Núñez, for all his dodgy moments where he'll like take an Antonio touch, he created mayhem. And he was an absolute nuisance. He was powerful with the ball. His pace was causing Everton nightmares. And I just sat there and I thought, we left this deal way too late to get over the mark. We should have had a plan A. We should have had a plan B. And if we really wanted Núñez in that January transfer market, why did we not say to Benfica, look, here's the money. We've got this medical booked in. We're going to get the deal done. Not leave it till the last 2 days. And unfortunately, it's this sort of decision making that hampers us in the window. We could buy, the best players in the world, but Moyes still has to get used to them. He still has to, for some reason, and I don't blame him, to be honest, he wants them to be up to his level. He wants to have that judgment with them instead of just throwing them into the first team. And we know he likes to make sure his players are incredibly fit. We know we've heard numerous times that he puts them through rigorous training sessions, which is fantastic. We all love to see our players given 100%. But when that mindset of they need to be to my level comes before are they ready for the first team or this player's quality is clear, that's a worry. And it should be a worry for any football fan. It should be a worry for any owner who's giving him £40 million to spend. So I do really question some of his judgment and as well the judgment at the club.
Yeah. How do you feel about this comment, James? Obviously mentioned that he is could be the perfect replacement for Rice, for instance. Obviously, it was a player we looked to bring in. Obviously, we completely changed tack from Onana to then go to Paqueta, so completely different profiles. But how would you kind of if Everton went?
I done a video on him last year. Literally, when we was looking at him, I was buzzing because I thought, you know what, this is the real deal. This is what Hammerhead says. Is bang on like Yaya Toure type player. This steamroll through people. I agree with what Sloth's saying about like the windows and everything. Don't get me wrong, but there's been certain times where the owners haven't helped Moyes out in that situation and sort of put him up on offer. Really, like the January window last year, when you're getting bids of like Rafinha and Phillips and Núñez, and they all come out like 48 hours before the window shuts. It's embarrassing, right? Because as fans, you can't lie to us. It's one thing you can't do is lie to a West Ham fan because one thing we're not is not stupid. We're a lot of things, but we're not stupid. So when I do look at the window as a whole, as certain windows, I do look at him at Moyes and wonder what his style of play is. Like, I'm thinking, like, what are you trying to achieve? If you're trying to achieve a possession-based game, then this system just is the system for you. But we haven't got the players for the system. Like Thomas Souček's been a major part of West Ham over the last few years, and certain fans, including myself, are like very hit and miss with him. Like one day he's very good, one day he's extremely awful, and teams are targeting him in a two. So I can understand that, but I just feel some of the players, these are not bad players who have come to club. Like Scamacca wasn't a bad player in Italy. For how much people not care her, I just don't think he's realised how fast the Premier League is. Like, he's played in Germany, he's played in France. He's a German international. Like, you don't go and play for Germany if you're rubbish. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think like David Luiz said, didn't he, back in the day, was playing in the French league for PSG is like playing FIFA on easy. So
that's what I'm saying. So you've got to look at it.
It's a massive change.
You got to look at it like that, and then you can also use that comparison to Paqueta, because Paqueta sometimes is dilly-dally on the ball, and I think he thinks he's got so much time when the Premier League's literally relentless. You know what I'm saying? So for me, Onana would have been the man for West Ham, but then would we have got Paqueta? So it's a toss of a coin, really. It's like either or.
Part of me does think that what we would have been looking to do is possibly sell Souček if we had Onana come in, because then we could still make a move for someone like Paqueta. And I think that's all well and good if you have a plan B. You have, if Onana had decided, even regardless if we'd sold Souček, then you still need to get someone in who's going to replace that mould.
Yeah.
But my problem is that when I look at our transfer dealings, I think that's a great player, but how does he fit into the idea of how we want to play? Do we have a second player who's going to be able to come in if that one's injured, and we're still going to play the same style? We've heard it said so many times, but it's this scattergun approach, and I feel like it's the same with our tactics as well as the players in the window.
Yeah. Are they good players though, Slough, or is it the manager not getting the best out of them? That's the question that really needs to be asked.
I think when we look at players like Scamacca, we know he scores goals. I mean, even the goal against Leeds, that is a fantastic strike. And if you're doing that with just a couple of chances, then you need to be asking the question of how come he's not doing that more. I think it is down to the manager, as Davis said. Is that Davis? Sorry. And old man Steve. But I think it's down to the manager and how we're playing. But there's this strange thing where I look at players like Cornet and I think, how can he have played so much at Burnley and suddenly this mysterious calf injury has come into play, and it's so rare, but Burnley were able to get him on the pitch far more than us. And it speaks volumes about the issues at the club. I think if you're picking up so many injuries in training, or you're going into games with players ready to get injuries, it's a question of your warm-up, it's a question of your facilities, it's a question of the whole setup at the club, the doctors, the medical staff, everything. You need to be looking at that and thinking, right, we've got a serious problem here. And it doesn't matter who we bring in, because we've signed players who have had no long-term history of injuries, and suddenly they pick up an ACL, or they pick up these string of injuries that it just boggles the mind.
Yeah, well, you look at Scamacca last season, pretty much injury-free, majority of it. Aged, no real injury history. Obviously, Paqueta, both of his main injuries have been the injuries picked up has been, I would say, is unlucky, because it is about a fall, and you can't legislate for a fall, so you can kind of understand that one. But when you look, as you say, Cornet is just another injury that is so rare. It's like one in so many, like to every 1 in 100 chance, something silly. Or no, one in like every, I think it's only 3 people been diagnosed with it in like 25 years. And it's just like, how are these kind of things just constantly happening? I know there's been obviously conversation before of the West Ham curse, but I think
I don't think
our
just
own tongue-in-cheek way of dealing with it, because it is that it's just, well, if it's not a curse, then it's just something is very, very wrong at the club.
Well, I don't think it's just that. I think it's also like when we had the whole issue with Ben Rama's blood, which I know sounds like some sort of Agatha Christie novel, but you have all this stuff coming out of the club. Oh yeah, there's an issue with his blood work now, and you think, if it wasn't an issue for Brentford, why is it suddenly an issue for you? And can you not deal with this in a way that is, look, there's a way to treat it, there's a way to get around it. we take that route. But it's this constant sort of juggling of balls instead of actually saying, this is a plan, this is how we're going to do. And if this piece is taken out of play, we're going to bring this one in to still play the same system or adjust in some way. And it doesn't feel like we have that.
Yeah.
I think for me, hearing what you lads are saying, I think this has been a build up from last season and all. Like, I know the new players have got injured, don't get me wrong, and I think we're unlucky on that. Like Skamaka getting injured, Paqueta, to name them two, even Aguerd to get injured. But I think last season, when he was really using only 14 players, really, like using that starting 11 literally week in, week out, I think personally it's been coming for West Ham for a long time. Like, certain men in the team are just going to go down because their strain just can't maintain it. Like, and I think it's either going to get worse, I believe, in the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks when we start going back to Europe. Like, when you've got to fly to somewhere and you've got to get back for the Sunday game, I think it could get worse.
Guardiola's moaning about flying from Manchester down to London. So,
yeah.
And he's saying about, his elite players are struggling with that level of travel. And we're obviously, they have a wider squad than us. They rotate more than us. So if Pep Guardiola is raising those concerns, obviously he's raising those concerns for a reason. Obviously, there's a reason why elite managers always talk about congestion of fixtures. It's trying to influence what happens in following seasons. But you make a valid point. We don't really rotate. We also have two midfielders who have, by all intents and purposes, been completely frozen out of the squad, really, in Manuel Lanzini and Fornals. And if you look at both of their kind of Instagram posts in the last few days, where Fornals is talking about don't let someone take away your smile, and then you've got one with Lanzini posting about he's one of the best passes, essentially in terms of completion rate in Europe, alongside Declan Rice. I think he's even above Declan Rice for completed passes. So there's clearly two players there that aren't happy about not playing and making it clear, so to speak. And again, it's just we're not playing well. We're struggling to score goals. We're struggling potentially to create, and yet these creative elements are not even able to get into the team. We take off Paqueta, and the response is to bring on Souček. It's not really a like for like. It's essentially a conceding of we're going to go back to another formation or a known pivot. To be fair to Souček, he played well against Chelsea, so I'll put that out there. But again, it's not this like for like. It's okay, right? My first choice is gone. I'm going back to my comfort. I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to go for something dynamic, something maybe risky. I'm going to go to my comfort zone, and those two know to play with each other. They've done the right for me. That's where I'm going now. And it seems odd that Lanzini seems to be really phased out, seeing as he was a go-to for Moyes for so long. So it's very unusual that.
Well, I just find it completely baffling that someone like Fornals is also being frozen out, because he's willing. He's showing the work rate, and he's showing that sort of attitude that we love at West Ham. It's a guy who's willing to play on the left wing, even though he's not an actual left winger, but he's willing to do that because the manager's asked him to. And yet his natural position, we could easily play him there. We could put him in the system, and he offers a lot of the same things that Paqueta does. However, no, frozen out. He's not getting a chance in that role. And you have to think, well, why is that? Is it because we've got a better player in that position? Well, I'd argue that, Flynn Downs isn't even getting a chance. I'd argue Souček is a completely different player. He's not similar at all. And Lanzini, he's not even getting a shake of the stick. So how has that decision been made that he's just completely ousted?
And I know people will argue they've had a chance because they've played in Europa Conference, but
we've got a 100% record in the Europa Conference.
Exactly. So, the thing is, I hear what you're saying, but when I look at the players that you just reeled off there, Fornals, Lanzini, Souček, even Downs, they all don't fit this system that he keeps playing five at the back. Because what it is, I had this argument on E20, right? And the lads I have the argument with, it does get heated with lads on E20 when we discuss it. Yeah, I won't lie. But when I look at West Ham in that system, I look at it that it's a defensive system straight away. I don't see us progressing the attacking and making chance after chance in that system. Like, people use it as a possession-based game. Now, if you want to go down that route, we need passes on the ball. Now, Flint Downs is one of the better. He's a really, really good passer on the ball, and he can't get on the pitch. With Fornells, I've never been Fornells' biggest fan. I won't lie, but I will say this: this season, I think we've needed him in a lot of games. I think there's certain games this season where he should have easily been on the pitch, right? In games where we need to press teams and literally hurry these teams up. And I just think it's on the manager, mate. And I think me and Mike have discussed it before on here and on E20 multiple times. I've turned around and said this feels like an Everend Grant season. It seems like we get a win, we get a point, everything's all right, and then we might lose one, draw one, draw another one, win one, then lose two. Yeah, it just doesn't. For me, I'm not. I am nervous, right? Because I'm looking at the gap now in the league. Wolves are 4 points clear, I think they are now, or something like that. So, there's a little gap starting to form there. If we don't sort ourselves out and start winning games, then we're going to be adrift, and then it's all hands to the pump. Then,
personally, I think we should have sacked Moyes after we lost to Wolves, if I'm being totally honest. But I think there has to be a change if we lose to Forest. Like, the Spurs game, I can kind of give them that. I think if we lose that, then the board have to be thinking, you've got to go into this Forest game, you've got to win it, but you've got to win it convincingly, because if you don't, how are we going to beat the teams around us, and how are we going to even push on against the teams who are above us? It's that real worry, as you said, like, we get one sort of result, half result, and then suddenly that's enough. That's he's turned it around, and it's just nonsense. I think
it's a bit like with Bilic, doesn't it? Remember when we kept going through those sequences of games, and then if we had 2 or 3 injuries, and then we lost, we didn't meet the quota he's meant to. But he had injuries, so we'll give him to the next one. And as we've said earlier, now that there's potentially 8 players that are out today. Again, so that's 8 first-team players that didn't train today for one reason or another. You go into, say, the Nottingham Forest game, if 4 of them are still out, then he still arguably, or the board will probably potentially argue with him. Well, okay, you haven't got your fully fit team. Fair enough. Maybe we'll give you another couple of games. But again, it's kicking the can down the road and not making decisions. And then Sloth has been rightly said throughout all of this, the guys at the top are not making the hard decisions because they don't want to, and that's possibly because they don't see themselves here beyond, say, March, April time.
Well, what really bothers me is that it's not so much a case of whether or not they're here at the end of the season is irrelevant, because if you are going down, you have an asset that is worth a lot less. And I don't care who you are. If you're selling a football club, and they may have an arranged price, they may have a price on the table whether or not they go down, but it is irrelevant if the owner coming in looks at the situation next year and thinks, what the hell are we going to do? Like, they claim to be, well, one of them claimed to be a West Ham fan, and I'm not going to sully David Gould's name in any way. I think he was the best of the 3, and nothing against him. But Sullivan is clearly the one making the decisions. And if he cared about this football club, then I do think he would have done something earlier in the season. Now
he's gambling, though, ain't he, Sloth?
Yeah, I think that's it. He's taking the gamble, knowing full well that if he sells probably after April and gets out before something happens, I think 650 million is the agreed price. So I think he's thinking, if I can get through to then and someone's still willing to buy, I'm 650 million split by.
But would someone be prepared to take the risk on that, though? Because if you're dancing with relegation,
they might strike a price based on, if we stay up, it will be this. We're going to give you this much now. Should we stay up, the price is then 650. If we're relegated, it's cut to this.
It's the small-minded nature of it, because look, if if we'd have really pushed on, if we'd have invested season after season, then suddenly you're looking at us being consistently pushing for top 6 or consistently pushing those big clubs. And the ballpark figure for the club goes sky high. Now, how small-minded do you have to be to not see that? And when you're thinking about businessmen, I've not made £1 billion. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm the expert. But how do you have an asset that is that valuable with that much potential, yet you go, what I'm going to do is I'm going to gamble. Like, I'm going to do this. Instead, when we've seen it not work multiple seasons, and what needs to happen is a change. And with Moyes, I think, that European season, absolutely fantastic. Could have been better, in my opinion. We could have won the competition, but in the summer, they needed to say, right, this is the goal. There's goodwill. However, if it's not met by this point, we have to change it. We have to change something. Now, that could be for us to go into January with a pot of money and you spend it, but woe be it upon you if by February, then nothing's changed. But it seems to be that it's just a case of, well, you've got a few more games. You've got a few more games. And you know what? The international break for the World Cup's coming up. What could we do? We're going to give you till after that. And instead, you're just playing with fire. It's a baffling bit of business because you're just losing money. You've lost a lot of value over the course of multiple seasons. And when we're talking about hundreds of millions, well, you could have been talking about 1 billion or 1.5 billion had we pushed on. And let's face it, that wouldn't have taken 500 million pounds worth of spending to get there. It's just a case of investing properly and investing in the roots of a football club, which has not happened. And however people like to spin it with the Sky Sports figures of us spending 100 million, it's irrelevant when the club isn't seeing progression.
Yeah, so James, coming straight off this. The one thing you made a good point about the being near 1 billion and so on. I think that's always been a fantasy of David Sullivan. But one of the ways he knew he could get there would be from owning the stadium, having control of the park. But he was never willing to pay for it. He wanted it as a handout. There's a reason why we haven't negotiated with the LLDC throughout the entire period and what to manage that stadium. He's gone on TalkSport and said, I'd happily pay more money to running the stadium if I was getting more in concessions. I was getting basically he wanted to run it, he wanted to pay less, he wanted to give more. Like, it was just all rubbish. He just wanted the handout and the park and everything to be handed to him and to West Ham because it was a money pit. It was always going to fail, and the only person who's shown any inclination or any group is PAI showed an inclination to actually go directly to the LLDC to make negotiations, to lay groundwork. Apparently, Krasinski's gone and done the same recently. So he's gone completely away from the monkey and the organ grinder. The monkey, and he's going straight to the organ grinder now because he's talking to the head of the LLDC directly. And obviously, that's a very big thing, actually. In fact, he's talking to them without Gold's representatives who are looking after his interests, without Sullivan, without Brady. He has circumvented all of them to go and have a direct conversation. Now, that could be because he's maybe thinking about taking over a majority of himself. Maybe he's looking just to take the land and the park and then to essentially entice in another person because it's, we now own this. You come in, you run another club. I'll own this part. It's just a club that could have made more of themselves had the board, they had the willingness to engage not just the fans, but with other entities that are associated with the club. And they've not had an interest because they are self-serving. And that's the way it is with Moyes. It's self-serving. It's all about saving money. It's all about not having to pay the extra 400k a month. I think that's what it is. Every month we go on, we save 400k or nearly 500k a month. It's all self-serving. There's the only reason he's still there. And as you say, as much goodwill as there was from last season, the goodwill is not going to keep us up. A good manager with good tactics, with goals and more goals than the opponent is what is going to keep us up. Sorry, go on, James. I just
that's right, mate. Let it out, mate. Let it out. Listen, I hear what you lads are saying. First things first. I think Kadinsky takes over West Ham. I don't think anyone else is coming. I think Kadinsky's here. He's a businessman. And let's be real. There's only 20 owners in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. So it's a small window of opportunity for an owner to come in and own a Premier League club. So I think Kadinsky takes over. I don't think Kadinsky's happy. I think after the Leicester game and the Crystal Palace game, he wanted Moyes out. That's why I was hearing. He said this is not good enough, right? Because he's got a lot of money invested in West Ham. I do believe he's part of the reason why the summer window, why we spent 160 million plus. I don't think this is because of like past stuff. I think it's because of him. Because I've never seen West Ham in all my 36 years of life spend that amount of money on players. It just don't happen to us. So for me, I hear what. Yeah, only a football manager. I hear what you're saying. It's the cheap and cheerful option every single time at West Ham, and that's where it's got to stop. And that's where it goes back to the mentality at West Ham. And I've had this argument before. We're going to spend £25 million on a player, £50 million on a player, but we won't go and spend £10 million on a manager that can make us win something or develop us into a team that could compete for trophies. Like, do you know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Well, Mike and I were saying it when we bought Diop for £20 million, and the season after he was worth supposedly £60 million. We were he's a monster, and we're going to be able to get this sort of money for him. Now, that is what should have David Sullivan salivating. He should be going, if I can do this, I can make so much money profit going forward. It's what clubs do to become sustainable. It's what Brighton do. And I'm not saying Brighton are fantastic, because I do think they are on that verge where they think if they have too much change, you could see a reverse. But it's irrelevant because you're missing opportunities. And when we look at the planning of the club, as you say, there's this mindset where, well, what we've got to do is we've got to spend on a goal scorer. Okay, yeah. What do you need to then do? Well, we need to make sure they get 20 goals a season. Yeah, okay, David Solomon. What next? Well, we need to make sure they're winning the balls in the air. Yes, but okay. What do we need to make sure we do to win games? Not concede. So go out and buy a centre back. No, I'm afraid not. No, that's not going to happen. It's this weird sort of mindset where there's no planning from the less glamorous areas of the game. And I think with Aguerd, it's almost a case of, we've got a player there who now is showing what he can do. But I think the board are almost scared off because of these injuries. They're not going to invest another £20 million in a centre-back like we were desperately needed when we let Dawson go. We needed an upgrade, but we just didn't move for one. And when we heard about the potential signing of Sander Berge, £20 million for a championship player who's ready to take that step up into the Prem and had played in the Prem before and done well, you've got to think, why wasn't that done? Why was that bit of business not looked at and sealed?
Not even with Moffey, £25 million bid apparently was accepted. After he said no, that £25 million again.
Yeah, just
it's like the new version of We Tried is turned into that money is now going to be pushed forward into the summer.
Yeah.
And it did. That's again was what they was kind of saying about last summer. The money that we didn't spend in the January window is the money we spent now. It's also being said that the money we spent now is also us paying forward essentially the Declan Rice money that we're expecting to get.
See, the thing is, I've heard this. What you're saying about it's always sort of a year later. It's West Ham always acting a year later. And when people say, and listen, I love West Ham to bits as much as you lads, but I look at our team and people say, "Oh, we've got a great team." I don't see that myself. I see an aging defence that needs sorting out. We've got two good players in defence, in my opinion, who can sort of do a job to like the best of their abilities, and one of them's an injury-prone player. Like Aguerd for me is top class, and Zuma is a good player on his day, but he's too hit and miss. Like you just never know what you're going to get with him. So the problem I have with it is that investment's been needed for a long time, like a hell of a long time, and I think the club have been starving it for the last 3 years. Ever since COVID hit, West Ham sort of was always trying to nick a bit of money, save a bit of money. And listen, I'm not against what Brighton and Brentford do. I hear what Sloth was saying there. But I think a lot of fans are very sentimental with players, especially at West Ham. Right, one thing but listen, I agree. Like if Declan Rice goes in the summer for £100+ million, I wish him all the best, and I'd expect that 100 million to be spent all throughout the team. Do you know what I'm saying? To boost us up, because players come and go, but West Ham will be there forever.
Exactly.
Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Completely agree with that.
So,
I don't think you can be sentimental nowadays.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's the thing with Brighton. Brighton are not very sentimental with their players. They look at their players. They look at the value of their players. If they get rid of a player, they go right. They get rid of him, then they go and bring in 2 or 3 more. Like, do you know what I'm saying? For lesser. I think I've heard this before from somewhere. I don't know where I heard it, but they do go out and spend money on lesser players and sort of like a scattergun approach. But it's very affordable, so to speak. Like Matoma. They signed him for £3 million, I think it was, or something ridiculous, yeah? But they've had a lot of other players who have been failures, yeah? But it's not a big hit, £3-4 million when if you can find 1 out of 5, then you're laughing. Do you know what I'm saying? Because that one covers the other 4, if that makes sense. So
also buying players the 2 to 3 year view. So we'll buy this player now, he'll go out on loan, or this player this year is going to be in our under 23. Next year they're out on loan, and then they're coming in for the following year because they've got a progression plan for that player. Some are we're buying them now to come in now. Some are they're going to come in a year's time. Some of them is in 2 years' time. But there's that line of succession that they've clearly thought out as to this player's coming in. This is when we envision them to come in, either as a squad player or they're going to come in to be a replacement for this one because we think someone's going to come in for him in a year or 2.
I agree. I really do agree with that. I look at Brighton. I look at Brentford's model, and the way Brentford run their show, I think is brilliant. Like the data analysis on their players, whether their players are £1 million or £10 million, they work on analysis on their sort of thing. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm not really one for analysis, but I do look at Brentford, and I think some of the players that they've picked up from the lower leagues, like Pinnock, I think it is, used to play for Forest Green. He was a non-league player at one stage. I look at Rico Henry, like Walsall. I look at even Ivan Toney, for instance, like Peterborough, and then he went to Brentford. Like I look at their talent that they've picked up, and these are not big hitters. Like I think the biggest player that they've had in recent history is Ericsson, and like he was a freak. So like when you sort of weigh it up, I think if West Ham could go down that model, but again, it's appeasing the fans, isn't it? That's the problem. Like,
I think that's the problem. I think, as you say, appeasing the fans. A football club, all honesty, shouldn't be about appeasing the fans.
Yeah.
The way a football club appeases a fan is winning games. Buying players should not be doing it to appease fans. Selling players shouldn't be done to appease fans. It's a business. You have to act accordingly and act in the interest of the business. And in the interest of business is winning games. So ultimately, fans are fickle, right?
Part of what makes me laugh is when you hear that kind of like attitude of, we can't sell him because he's done so much for the club. And then you look at like do you remember when we posted that picture of players in the dustbins when they were getting the ice baths, and all the comments underneath are like, we're a Premier League club, what are you doing? And it's like, we're a Premier League club, but you also need to remember that the next time you jump on and say about James Collins and how he's a starter for us and you know he's a legend, and it's like, but you need to think about the long term here, and someone like that needs to be integrated into the staffing. If you want them to be a legend, if you want them to stay around the club, they need to be looking at the back seat and thinking, like, how can we progress forward? And it's just always been that sort of lack of planning. Even like with Payet, I remember saying it when there was rumours that the PSG bid was £60 million, and how anyone thought with his level of performances we could keep him, I don't know. Like, even if we'd hit Champions League, do you really think he would have stayed? Because he could have gone to, say, a PSG, where he'd have gotten treble the money that he was on.
I think what it is, though, the fear is with a lot of fans is if they get the money for him, is it going to be reinvested?
Yeah,
that's the ultimate fear. Sort of thing.
Totally
and that's it. With the current setup, it is that. And, you know, you've made a really good point around Brentford, and something Brentford have really failed. I say failed, but this is because they were so good in it. They were one of the first people into the Scandinavian market buying up players. And in recent times, they've not hit it as well. The two players have recently left Denmark, have now got one to Benfica, and the other one's gone to Atalanta. And they are absolute quality, and the fact that no one's taken a chance on them, they both cost 10 to 15 million pounds respectively, but those two players guaranteed next year or the year after people are going to come calling for around 40-50 million pounds for a pair of them. And it's the thing is, again, Moyes made the point himself. He wants the Red Bull model. He wants to bring in young players. He wants to work within maybe unfavored leagues. Well, if that was the case, there are players right for the picking in Scandinavian leagues. Anil Ahmedhovic, player that me and Sloth talk about so many times in the Scandinavian league, absolutely stunning, doing really well in the Championship now. Did well with League One as well, but it's again.
Look at Austria and look at the like Salzburg, RB Salzburg there, and you look at how players like, you know, we were talking about potentially getting Sosbolai at one point, and, you know, he was available for a loan, and he was available for potentially Betis, and they're banging on Leipzig's door saying, we can make this happen, we can do this, and it didn't work out. But why there was no one there going, actually, we can pick up the pieces and go, here you go. Yep. Now, there's this clear lack of just wider sight in the transfer market and in the scouting. You know, I remember about 2 years ago that it came out, we only had one scout at the club, and you think this is a Premier League outfit with one scout, but you look at how teams in these European competitions from places like Cyprus or from places like Austria, as I mentioned, they compete and they give their best. Now, yeah, every so often you're going to get a player who just completely misfires because he worked in 1 or 2 games, but he couldn't sustain that level of performance. But you look at the amount of players who move from those sides and progress forward, and someone who I've banged on religiously about, Okafor, and he played at Basel. Now he's gone to Salzburg. And if you offer them a decent packet of money, decent wages, of course they're going to come to us. But it's the problem of when you go to someone like PSG or you go to someone like a Villarreal who don't really need to sell because they know their asset and they know the worth of it, and you go, we're going to offer you this much, and the player goes, well, I could wait, I could move to you, or I could wait for a season where I know I'm going to play and start and see what happens next month, see what happens in January, see what happens in next summer. It's that sort of mindset that we need to change and be more proactive with.
Do you think, obviously we're running quite late, but that's fine. Do you think like we will only improve when, say, Noble's role is more clearly defined? He clearly has a very clear involvement from the first team down to, I think he even said under 7 or under 12s, where he's actually training with each age group essentially to understand the players and get a better kind of feel for who they are and what they are. And obviously he was at the Monaco game, for instance, recently as well, obviously on a scouting mission, but it's a team that me and Sloth absolutely adore from a perspective of how they've managed to scout and so on. And do you think a part of that, he needs to also be talking to the likes of Monaco and talking to the likes of Paul Mitchell, who apparently is also leaving Monaco at the end of the season, to have that conversation around what are you doing within your scouting? What types of players are you looking for? How are you identifying them? And then ensuring that those players, when they come in, they fit. Like Mo Kamara was at Salzburg last season, come in. Basically, he's had to come in and take the mantle of Tchouaméni. Now, he's not got the all-round game of Tchouaméni, but he's come in and been superb in that position. Ben, how was it? Ben Wisser. I can't remember his complete name now. It's just escaped me. But the little man up front, who we said was too short, they've gone on what has been absolute, again, a revelation. It's like, do you guys feel that we need the likes of Noble to be reaching out to these other clubs that are performing at an elite level from in terms of talent ID and then development to actually get to formalize actually how we can set out a 5-year plan? Because he has talked about a 5-year plan. So do you feel that he needs more support as well in which to get that? Regardless of the board, let's take that out of the equation. Do you think that he needs additional people in and around him in which to support that process to actually see us move forward as a club?
I think Mark Noble cares like us three do on this stream. That's one thing I will say. He won't ever do West Ham dirty on anything. The problem is with it, I trust Mark Noble in the way he wants to go around things, because he's a perfectionist. He wants to do it the right way. The only thing I don't understand is what happens when he wants a player and he's told no. That's the only thing that really sort of baffles me a little bit. How is he going to sort of handle the rejection, basically? Because
wasn't he? I think Moffy was
yeah,
that was part of the falling out.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's only going to galvanise him some more. Do you know what I'm saying? If Mark's going around Europe looking at players, then that's what we want to see. Like, that's one thing we do want to see from him. The only thing is, I just feel, and I'm going to go back to the ownership for a second. I feel until the ownership's gone and an ambitious owner is in place, nothing will change. Because I think Mark's there because he's a face of West Ham. If you want me to be truthfully honest, I think it appeases the fans. He goes, oh, well, it looks like there's someone who cares about the club in there. But in fact, Mark's really being a scout, technically, and just going around looking at players, but not got any power to sort of give the final say. I think the final say really goes to Rob Newman on that. So I don't know. I do fear that one day he's going to get told no, and I think he could walk away. That's the only fear I do have, because I know Mark won't do us bad. Like, do you know what I mean? He's one of us, and he cares about this club as much as we do. So
you think it's the perfect fall guy for him as well? It's because it's a perfect person to absorb any negativity and to present some level of positivity.
It takes the weight off the owners, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Yeah, exactly as you say. As well. How about you, Sloth? We'll make this the last piece before we wrap up.
Well, this perfectly encapsulates the point I made about our lack of vision with players. You know, the player we're looking at, Disassi, was, someone that we both mentioned, and we said this is a perfect David Moyes centre back, and Monaco snapped him up. Now, you have to think, why are we suddenly thinking about signing a 60 million? Because let's face it, that's probably what Monaco are going to look to get for him, about 60 million pounds or euros. And why are we not being more proactive with this? Why are we not thinking, right, where's the next Disassi? Where's the next player we can go with? And it's such a short-sighted approach. If Mark Noble can pull off that deal, amazing. But then you need to think about, okay, what are we going to do next? We've got a player who has no kneecaps and, isn't fit enough to play a full season in Zuma. What are we going to do here? We're going to keep paying him, and we're going to keep looking to make sure that he's in the starting lineup. Or are we going to think, right, we've got Disassi, we've got Aguerd, we need to now develop centre-backs around that. And, Mark Noble will appeal to a certain level of football player. And I don't mean that in any disrespect. I love Mark, and I think what he did for the club is fantastic. But let's face it, if you're going out to the south of France to sign a player from Gambia, then their footballing hero is not going to be Mark Noble. And that's not me generalizing. That's just how football works. And Mark Noble can have an impact, but he needs the support, and he needs a vision in place so that if he can go forward and say, right, I'm looking at a player from Belgium and we're going to appeal to that player as someone who can come in, right, this is how I'm going to tackle it. He needs a plan of action and, you know, a budget that he can say, right, I've got this much to play with. He needs to, it kind of almost, I'm going to probably get hammered for this, but it needs to be like a football manager basis for him, where you say, you've got this much to spend, you've got this budget, this is what you can do. Because how else is he going to learn? How else is he going to learn how to set up these deals? And if he goes into the Championship, I think that's a great avenue for him, because the players there are probably going to know who he is. You know, they're going to recognize him. That people who work at those clubs are going to respect him. And if he wants to go out and sign a player from a Championship club who goes into that centre-back position, Greaves is one that I love at Hull, who I think, you know, if Mark Noble's knocking on your door and saying, come sign for West Ham, he's going to be like, oh, crap, that's Mark Noble. Yeah, blimey, I'm going to get involved. But if he's going to go and knock on Axel Disasi's door and go, come sign for West Ham, he's probably going to shut the door on him and go, I'll wait out for Barcelona, thank you very much.
But he has got a connection with Monaco, though, hasn't he, Mark? Because he knows the is it the Prince of Monaco or the King of Monaco? It's like ridiculous.
I am sort of playing with fire now, and it is a bit of a you know, it's a bit of an underhanded comment, and I don't mean it with any disrespect, but I just think that as a football club, we need to make sure that he's getting the support to make sure that if Mark Noble comes knocking on your door, you're going to go, yeah, I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to give you time. And I think that's where perhaps he's been let down. He needs that person next to him who can go, right, this is us. This is our project. Come play for us.
Yeah. And you could probably argue maybe Moyes isn't the man to go in with the dour approach as to make you go, this is the man who's going to play exciting football or excite me about playing for the club. Moyes seems like a lovely bloke, obviously, but I can't imagine he is one that sells the dream as well as maybe some other managers, and also has that aura around him that when a player speaks to them, they're like, I want to play for you. I don't necessarily get that feeling. But James, any last thoughts, any last comments before we wrap up?
Big game Sunday, obviously against them up the road. It's a game that we don't like to lose. That's one thing I will say. And what I want to see is I just want to see a gritty performance on Sunday. If we just get through it, I'll take a draw literally right now. I really would. I do fear for this game, though. I will say that. Because if we do lose this game, the Forest game becomes probably the game of the season for us. And if we lose that, then I don't know where. I really just don't know where we are. Do you know what I'm saying? I think it is a big game for certain players. And to round it up from me on that, I want to see a performance to say, you know what? Yes, we're back. We're back in action. I think the last two games, and as we spoke about at the start, I think it looks better than what it actually was, in my opinion. And Sunday's going to be a test because they've just been hammered by Leicester. They lost against Milan yesterday, and they're going to want to try and have a go at us and really put us to the sword, really. And they're not on form either. So hopefully we can pick up a positive result against Spurs on Sunday for me.
Yep. Slav, any last words?
Yeah, completely agree. I think going forward, that Forest game should be do or die for me. And I do worry that maybe they've left it a little bit too late, but I think there's just enough time where if we were to get in a new manager, you can get that new manager bounce, pick you up, 5 or 6 wins here and there, and that'll be enough to guide you out of that relegation fight. So, yeah, I think as James perfectly summed up, they are going to be looking to put out a real statement. So I am a bit worried. I do think if we get tonked, then I think questions should really be asked about Moyes, and I would think anything more than 2-0, I would be probably saying thanks for your efforts. It's much appreciated. Here's the door. But yeah, going to be positive. Going to say that with all their uncertainty, with Conte in particular seeming like he's just not really fussed in general, there could be a positive there for us. I just hope that the 8 injuries we have regarding training doesn't come back to bite us.
Yeah, exactly. So completely agree, guys. Knowing our luck, we'll end up being like Big Sam days where we had no striker. We end up going there with a 6-man midfield and somehow come away with a 3-0 victory, which would be the most West Ham thing ever, to be playing so badly to go and do that with all the injuries. But it is a big game. It's an even bigger game the following week. As I think we've all said, we've all been consistent with, if we do not win that game, relegation starting to look like a very viable, I don't want to say option, but a very viable reality for West Ham, unless certain decisions are made in the boardroom, maybe to make that change or to enforce change on the current people in charge of the first team. But yeah, that's a conversation for another day. It's been a great show, lads. Really appreciate you being on. Everyone in the comments, thank you very much. And let's all hope that we see a positive result this weekend and we do turn the corner against Nottingham Forest and we finally pick up the vital 3 points we need. And I'm not one for always saying let's be positive, but yeah, look, let's be positive. Let's see what comes. Forest is going to be a big game, very big game. And I think it's one where hopefully the crowd are up for it and not just tense and subdued like it was against Chelsea. I really hope that in that game that the fans make the point and let those players know that we are 100% behind them and willing them on to victory. But we'll end it there. Thanks everyone for watching. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you.